Great. So we are going to start on a clean slate. So let's say I have a folder called Workshop 1 Demo. So I have this folder in my drive. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize a Node application in it. And if you have had Node installed, then it should give you the version as you can see here. Same thing with npm, right? So at this point, you should get these responses, or when you're trying to check the version for the node and the npm, you should get these whatever version you have. By the way, if you have anything to say, question, or anything to tell me, just type in the chat or just chime in. All right, very cool. So the way you would initialize a node project is you would do npm init, and then you press enter. Now it's going to prompt you to give the names and all the other details. By default, I think it will take the name of the folder in which it is in, like this one, Workshop 1 Demo. You can just press enter, enter, description, enter, 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 enter to the end, and then is this okay? And I say yes. Now, what this is going to do, this is going to create your package.json file, and your package.json is basically the file that describes your project in general, including its dependencies and what kind of scripts it has, and so on and so forth. If this is already linked to the repository, then you will have the repo information here as well. All right, I hope that everybody has been able to do the same thing. I think if you've installed Node correctly, then you'll have been able to do that. All right, so what's missing here? I want this to be a little bit interactive. What do you think is missing so far? So we have initialized it. What do you think is the logical next step? I'm asking you because this is already in the first week, so I think you went through this with Eduardo already, right? I guess not. Okay, so what we will need is, well, an index file, right? It's a JavaScript file, index file. Suppose we have just a console log that says hello. So how do we run this file then? I want some participation if possible. If not, that's okay. Oh, heard. There's something in the chat. Node, yeah. Right, node index.js, that's correct. So we would run this this command node index.js, and then we will press enter. So basically runs this index file, which indeed it prints out hello. That is correct. By the way, just a quick tip: when you're trying to execute JavaScript files, you don't have to give it the extension. So you can, as just the same way you can do node index, and it will run all the same. And there is one more thing that is probably useful with terminals, in any kind of terminal. And I've seen some students do this, and I think it's a waste of time. When you want to run the same command that you have run before, or that you have given before, you don't have to write the whole thing. Node index again. You can just press the up key in your keyboard, and it's going to try to find whatever you have given it before. It's much easier than to type node index again. All right, that's all well and good. What I think you guys are familiar with the test script, yes? Thing like npm test. Well, we don't have any tests, so it's going to complain. But what do we mean when we say npm test? We understand that it's trying to run the jest test, I think, in the cases that you have tried before. But where do we define this test script, actually? It's actually here. This is the script that when you initialize the project, this is a test script which is going to, when you install Jest, it's going to, there's no test now. But for example, when you have Jest or whatever it is, a React testing library, it is going to run the specific test. I think if you go to your project that you have done, functional project that you done last week, you go to your package.json, you will see this test script is different. It's going to say just something. All right. But there's another common script that people use. It's called well, you don't have to call it start, but it's convention to call it start, right? So it's basically just the same thing as we did with that we did in the terminal. So usually we want start to be node index, right? Or index.js, whatever it is. So what does this mean? If we save this and then we say npm start, so whatever start is going to be to execute it when we press enter. So this means that it's going to execute the script start, but start is just node index.js. Does that make sense? I guess that's a yes. Very good. So some may ask, why do we want to put this in a script of its own? Why can't we just keep typing node index? Anybody has got any idea, maybe? Why it could be cumbersome to do this all the time? Well, now that the only command that you want to give is node index, yes, that may not make a difference. But imagine if you have other commands that you want to have executed with the start. Then it's much easier to put everything into a script, and then you just call npm start. I hope that that makes sense to you. Now, before I move on, I want to introduce a very nifty package called NodeMon. So if you go and Google NodeMon, I think you will find the npm page. I will paste the link in the chat. Here it is. Now, I like it so much to the point that I really recommend that you install it globally. So what you can do in the terminal is that you would say npm I or install and then global NodeMon, and I'll explain in a bit what it does and why it's so useful. If you don't want to install it globally, you can remove this flag key, right? But I think it's going to be useful, so might as well do that. So if you do that, take some time and then install this package. All right, so I assume at this point you have done it. So what it does is you can configure it to do many things, but one of the things that it does is going to watch your files, and then if you have made changes to it, it is going to rerun basically whatever you tell it to run. You can also configure it so that whenever you save, even though you don't have any changes, it will rerun whatever you tell it to run. For example, if we say node index, yes, it's going to run index once. But if you say nodemon index, it's going to watch. Now you see it prints hello, right? Let's say you say hello is there, and then you save the file. If you have run nodemon, then whenever there is a change, it's going to rerun the same whatever you tell it to run. So it's really useful, especially in development. You can also tell it to re-execute whenever you save. So there's no change. There are no changes here. But if I save again, Command S or Control S, it's going to run the script again. Now, what I would like to do is I would usually go here, and then I would tell the start script to actually execute nodemon. So nodemon index. Okay. So if I Command C or Control C here, it's going to stop, and then I'm going to say npm start, but the start script is now nodemon. So I press enter, it's going to run the same thing. Wait, I have not saved. I have to save that. Right. So, and this is also one of the benefits of having a start script. So whenever you want to run it, you just types npm start in the terminal, but you change whatever it is here. So far so good. Everybody, did anyone face any trouble with nodemon? It's awfully quiet today. So I'm assuming your silence is your tacit success and agreement. Great. Stop me anytime, by the way. No? Okay, great. I have 21 people, but no one's anything. At least say something in the chat. Okay, we're not the chatty type.
It's all good.
Okay, great. So with that out of the way, let's sort of dive into the codes. Right. So the first thing that I'm going to throw your way, because I need some codes for later concepts. Although I think you will learn this, or you have learned this, or you will learn this with Eduardo, is the difference between a for each and a map, these array prototype methods. The reason I'm bringing this up, I know that probably to some of you this is very obvious, but at least as of last week, I have seen some people confuse what they're actually doing. So I'm just going to touch upon that real quick. So suppose I have an array, right? And these are the elements of the array. So what's the difference between if I say array for each, and then I can go each element, and then oh, by the way, this is a very nifty shortcut that I think you should know. You don't have to type console log every time. You can just go log and then press tab on this one, and it's going to autocomplete for you. So that's really nice. So what's the difference between this this, right? It seems that it's this. It seems to you perhaps at first that it's the same. So if I save, so it's going to print out the elements of the array for each, and the same thing for map.
أوصل نعم.
Sorry.
تمام.
I think I need to mute someone here. It's probably some private conversation. Okay. Right. All right. So what's the difference? They both print the the array elements. All right. So to bring that to, suppose now I want to return. Okay. Suppose we have this return 1, and then I have another const, which is the return value, and then I want to say, I want to print out whatever these methods return, right? And then I go save. Oops, sorry about that. I think we should delete this. All right, so if you save, so it's going to say return 1. It's going to say return 1 is undefined, while return 2 is basically the array itself. Are you guys familiar with string literals? This is a very nifty notation, which allows you to combine JavaScript expression with string. So if you have this backtick, you can combine literal strings and then insert JavaScript expression and turn it into string with this $sign and then curly brackets. Are you guys familiar with that? Yes, okay, great. Just in case if you didn't. So what's happening here is that when we're mapping each element to itself into for each actually does not return anything. That's why when we're trying to print red return 1 or red 1, it's saying undefined here. Whereas when we're mapping each element to itself in map, we actually get something because map returns something. No, for each does not mutate the current array. That's not true. What for each does is basically it iterates through the elements of the array, and then it does whatever you tell it to do inside this statement, but it does not mutate the array. All right, so suppose we, just to show you that it does not change anything, let's say we do this, right? E plus 1, and we save, and we get, this is plus 1, right? But if we also want to print the original array, so if we go it's called array. So the original array, even though we try to do this does nothing, but the original array is not mutated per se. But I needed this piece of code so we can, I can teach the other concept that I want to teach, which is the implicit and explicit return. And what do I mean by that? Now, you may see that the map function here, actually, these numbers probably not so. Let's say we have another array, right? We have another array which is just this number. So the difference between map is map actually returns something, while for each does not return anything. So you can do the same stuff, I guess, inside for each and map. But if you want to return a new array out of the array that you're mapping, then you use map. But for each, all right, so we can do this. All right.
I think,
Yes.
excuse me,
Yes.
I think here for array have two, for each and map. As we know, the map will return a new array. And also for each means that when achieve what we need, he will take exit from the array, right?
No. I wanted to. I wanted to include this comparison between the for loops in.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I need to ask about. If you make comparison between map and for each.
No, okay. What I wanted to compare is for each and the regular for loop. Because with for each, for example, you cannot break out of the loop even if you have achieved some the condition that you want. So there are different types of for loops in JavaScript. There is for each. There's the regular for loop, as you know it, right? Where let I is equal to 0, for example, and then I is I don't know, 1000. Keep incrementing at each, right? So this you can actually use the break statement, for example, in this for loop, but you cannot do it in for each. And then there are subtle nuances that differentiates for each.
But in the map, we cannot make a break. That mean
neither can you neither with the for each value.
Oh, okay.
There are other loop syntaxes in JavaScript, for in, and then I think it's for off. But I don't want to cover that now. I hope you'll cover that with Eduardo. Otherwise, I'm going to probably have a third part for this. But anyways, moving on. The reason why I want a for each and a map here because I want to explain the concept of implicit and explicit return. Now we have we've said that for each does not return anything, so we can probably remove this for now. But map actually returns something. But we've been saying return and this and that, but what do we mean by return? Because there is no return keyword here, right? So in this case, it is actually the return is implicit inside this anonymous function. What do I mean by that? Okay, so let's say I have this, right? And then I want to log array. All right, this is the mapped array. Mapped array is equal basically array dot map, and then I want to increase every element by 1, right? So something like this. So if I save this, so the mapped array will be the original array, but each element is increased by 1. Does that make sense? This is pretty straightforward.
Yes, this is good. Yes,
right.
This is the new array plus 1 each one. Yes,
exactly. Okay, so but the return here is implicit because it's not explicitly stated. We can have this. This is like a regular array function. We can have it explicit by saying return and then the element plus 1, and if we save this and rerun, we will get the same result here. But be careful with the syntax. If you want to use the return keyword, then you better make sure that the statement or the body of the function is within curly brackets, and vice versa. You cannot do it like this. It's going to throw an error, right?
What do you mean? This is the body out of the map body?
Sorry.
What do you mean about this? What's the difference between brackets?
All right. So essentially, whatever is inside the map is actually the function that you use to map the array elements, right? It's just that it's this one is anonymous. Let me show you. I think this is the next thing, but all right. Usually you put something inside the map, right? So
Right.
this is basic. You guys are familiar with arrow function, of course. I hope. I assume so. Or what is that? What is chat saying? Yes. Okay. Great. If you're not familiar, just tell me. Okay. No dissent. So let's say we have a function. We call it the mapper, right? And this is basically just the arrow function. Like this. So let's say it takes in each element, whatever the element is, and then actually return element plus 1. Right? So quite simply, what you have in your inside your map method is actually just a mapper function. It has to be a function. So you put it here, paste it. Then if we run again, now we get the same result. So, but usually since it's quite simple, we declare it anonymously, meaning, yeah, are you guys familiar with anonymous functions? Basically functions that anonymous, you don't name, and typically you define on the spot. So this thing is basically the same as e, right? So there we go. It's the same thing. But here's the thing. This is an anonymous function with implicit return. And this is not a named function with explicit return. However, being anonymous and being implicit or explicit, they're not mutually exclusive. You can make this function also return whatever it is implicitly. And the way you do it is the same thing. You remove the return keyword, but it does not work like this because, I'll show you, it's going to get undefined because of the curly brackets. So what you need to do is you need to replace the curly brackets with regular brackets. Let's remove this. And if you do this, this will work. Does this make sense or questions? Questions about explicit and implicit returns? It's clear. Okay, very good. Now you may ask, why don't we just implicitly return all the time, right? That's probably the question that you ask. What it's basically, it's shorter syntax, so you save time. Well, I'll tell you, there are some cases. This is not everything, but not all the cases. But there are some cases where you actually want to return. You want to have the explicit return statement. For example, we say if e is greater than 3, then return e plus 1. Otherwise, else return e. Of course, there are more elegant ways of returning this, but just to give you an example, a rather contrived example, is sometimes you want the explicit return statements. With cases like this, you can't help but have explicit return statements. But there's another, I think I've seen this last week with one of the students when they're trying to map an object. So let's get rid of this one now. Let's keep it anonymous for now. Right. So suppose you want to return, let's say, a new object which has an ID that is based on this array elements, right? So usually you want to start an ID probably from 0. So how would you write an object? What is the notation for an object?
Dot notation or a bracket notation?
So it's basically a curly bracket, right? And then you give it the key value for the property. Let's say I want an ID that is basically each element minus 1. So we start the element with, so we have this element 1. The next element is 2. Therefore, we want the ID to start from 0. So it's going to be from 0 to 4. For whatever reason, we want to return an array of objects, right? So we have a problem here. The problem is that, here's the thing. Previously, with E mapped to E, or E plus 1, whatever it was implicit. Therefore, we did not need the return statement. However, if you want to keep it implicit like this, it's going to complain. It's going to say undefined. Why? Because JavaScript thinks that this is actually this is expecting an explicit return because of the curly brackets. Now, the curly brackets, now we intended it for the object, right? Not for the function, the body of the function itself. And these are the cases where we need to have explicit return. So we say return and then this object with the key ID. Of course, you can do have other keys here. But when you do that, we actually end up with an array of objects with this ID keys. The values, the result of this map. Is this does this example make clear why sometimes we need an explicit return statement? One of the cases, one of the scenarios. All right, great. Now we move on to the juicy stuff, which is the extensions. So if you go to your Visual Code Studio and then go to the extensions, you will see your installed extensions over here. So let me kind of get better, right? So there are a lot of extensions that I could probably recommend, which will make your coding experience in Visual Code Studio much nicer, much easier than it would have otherwise been. But well, for me, the extension that I use, they depend on the project, but there are some extensions that are quite essentials. The first one that I would probably recommend among these is Prettier Code Formatter. So I would really urge everyone to type a search for Prettier and then install it. And I'll show you the magic of Prettier. Everybody there?
Yeah, we can.
Yes,
Right.
we are here.
So suppose I am doing the same thing. This is basically the same thing that I did before. I say mapped array is basically array map e plus 1. Right? And then I save. It's going to print this array. But have you noticed that my code has been looking very pretty so far? And why is that? Well, it's because of these extensions, of course. By the way, while we're at it, you can also install ESLint here, and then install the prettier ESLint. While we are at it, why don't we do it? So I think this one especially, this is an extension or to format JavaScript and TypeScript. We're using JavaScript, using prettier ESLint. So I hope if you do this correctly, all those annoying squiggly red lines will disappear. So I assume at this point you. Oh, by the way, you need to do this. But before we do that, I'll show you the magic prettier. I suppose I go to. I'll just disable this for now. Reload required. So what happens is, let's say I do something like this, right? I think this should still work, and then I save. Yes, it should still work, but it's really, really not very nice to see. This is not formatted in a very nice way, and that's where the magic of prettier comes in. So if I go back and enable it, and then there's one thing that you need to do. I think you go to any code block, you Command Shift P or Control Shift P, and then you go Format Document With. That's whatever the default is. Prettier ESLint, for example. You can use this prettier. You do that. You need to do that. And then there's another thing that you need to do. I guess you go to extension settings, and extension settings, you type in format. And I really suggest you check these two boxes, format on paste and format on save. This means that whenever you save a file or whenever you paste a code, it will format automatically. I myself don't like format on type because that means it's going to format as I type, and I don't like that.
How did you get to the settings? I can't find the right
So
button.
you can go to, for example, the easiest way is probably to go to any settings of any extension, and then go to extension settings, and then just remove whatever extension that was. So format, and these things should show up. I think after you have made your formatter prettier ESLint, and then I suggest you check these two. Otherwise, you're gonna have to do them manually. You're gonna have to go like format document each time, or Shift Alt, whatever it is, Shift Alt 2. You cannot see them. Yeah, Shift Alt F, which I don't want to do that. I want it to format. Now it looks like this, right? So if you see this is the plus and then 1 underneath. If I cut this and then I paste, because I've enabled format on paste, did I turn that on? Something funny is going on. Okay, let's try it. Oh, I have to do that again.
Wasn't he prettier ESLint that you use?
Yes. So I think you have all installed this. ESLint, prettier, and then prettier ESLint. Oops. So have you guys managed to do it? Are you guys there?
Yeah, we're here. We're here.
So far so good?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, very good. Very good. Now,
only confusion is that we've already installed like ESLint and NPM, but it doesn't show up as these extensions. You know, we did.
yeah,
did
but
it
you,
through
I
the
think you
command
install
line.
them as an npm package, but
Yeah.
I'm not telling you to install them as IDE extensions. I think if you have these, by now I think you should have these two running, right?
Yeah, we have ESLint package and NPM. Yeah.
All right. So, all right. Great.
And
Great.
Jest.
Great. Sorry, prettier ESLint doesn't have an extension. What do you mean? You cannot find this one?
Yeah, if I click, I don't see the setting. Like you told us to click
mean-
on extension settings, but when I
Okay.
click on Prettier ESLint, it doesn't have.
Yeah. I mean, this
extension.
is just actually this depends on prettier ESLint.
Okay, so I don't need to go to the settings and
Yeah.
okay,
No,
do the
so
format thing.
what do you mean do the format thing?
I
Yeah,
think
you typed format for the setting of like
save on format or format on save or format and paste. So that's
Oh,
the
that one.
ESP.
So the way you do it is you go to any JavaScript file, you go command or control shift P, and then you type format document with, and you do it with this, for example, or whatever you want.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking, or is that something else?
No, it was like a checkbox you did for.
Oh, okay. You can go, for example,
Yeah.
any.
Yeah, and I did for all of them except for the Prettier ESLint.
No,
because
it's. I think it's global, so it's not that.
Okay.
If you type in the settings with format, it does it for every. I think it's a global setting here. We can do this one.
Mm.
All right, very cool. Anyone else? It's okay. We have time. I think. We're good. Well, this is the important stuff, so we have time. Anyone? Okay, great. All right, the next one that I probably recommend highly is, oh yeah, this auto rename tag. This is quite interesting. So suppose we have, well, you don't have a React component that returns JSX, but let's say we have const component, and we say, well, this is syntactically correct, the return, and we say return a div, right? This says hello. Well, this is just one div, but suppose you have things inside it, say an H1, and then H1 has hello. Oops, okay, it's going not going towards anything, but in any case, so this let's keep it with let's keep it like this. So this auto rename tag, what it does is, if you have it and then you change the opening tag, let's say you want it to have to be an H2, it's going to automatically change your closing tag, and this is very useful, especially if you want to. I think you guys are about to learn about HTML and CSS, so this is very, very useful. All right, the other one is called yeah, this is the bracket pair colorizer, which you can also customize to change the colors, right? I would really recommend to pair it with the indent rainbow. So the indent rainbow, as it says, basically tells you where each line is indented. So how many indents, and this is really, really cool, especially if you pair it with this and the prettier formatter, which automatically formats the indentation anyways. So let's say I have a so probably we'd want to install those two for now. Suppose we have a like code. I'm just going to copy and paste the code that I have. Write something like this, and then let's say suppose I have something like this as well. Right. So it's going to tell you the indentations, whatever the indentations is. And let's say there's another example. It's a const func, which is a function. So we have something like this. So the thing with that is, let's say we have, I don't know, for some reason we have a curly bracket here, and then another log here, and then this log logs whatever is this variable. Oh wait, that's not a good thing. Yeah, that's a keyword. Well, with this, it may be obvious, but if you have a bigger function or a bigger whatever component, I think it would be very easy to sort of try to pair which closing and opening brackets they are. You see these are two curly brackets, but with the color, we can easily differentiate which one belongs to which, because sometimes it can be something like this. I guess with the extension, it's not going to be like this, but it could be like this, and it could be quite confusing sometimes. So if you don't have this on, for example, disable, to reload, then you'll see something like this. And I think it's much more difficult to see. This is just the same color. And with more code, it's going to be more difficult. Is everybody on board so far? Yes, very good. Okay, there are other extensions as well, but they're probably not that essential. This is really good if you want to work with React, which you will. This is also very good. So CSS peek is what it does is allows you to peek at the. It's if you open this, since I think you're going to learn about CSS this week, so this could be very useful. So what it does is it allows you to peek at the CSS class. There you go. So this is a very nifty and neat extension that you should probably install as well if you're going to work with CSS a lot. These are the things that come to mind. If I find anything else, I'll probably share with you. And if you find anything else, share it with your fellow students as well. All right, so I think I'm going to take like a couple of minutes if somebody has any questions or doubts or anything like that about anything that we've covered today. All right, so it looks like everybody is clear. That's really good. So what I'm going to do is probably we should take like a 5-minute break, and then we're gonna start with the second part of this lecture, which will be about, let me pull it up here. Right, it's going to talk about more array methods. It's going to talk about destructuring, import and export in other files, higher order functions. And I think if we have time, we will talk about scopes and closures. Closures are an interesting thing. So I'll see you back in 5 minutes, or rather, let's meet at 5:05. Is that good?
Yes, okay.
All right. See you
Yeah.
soon. Thank you for that, Amy. All right, we're recording again. Sorry about that.
And can I ask, how did you access this replacing?
Oh, so it's Command F or Control F. Otherwise, you go here.
Command F. Okay, yeah.
Somewhere here.
And the previous, there was when you were,
Fine.
and the one you said that when we can replace the, not replace, but add in each line gender
Oh,
when we
yeah,
edit.
good
Was it
question.
Alt?
Yes. Good question, because we started recording again. So if I go back again, so the way you do it is first you put your cursor per one place where you want to type, and then press Alt and keep pressing Alt, and then left click on wherever else you want to do it, like this, right? And then when you're done, you can release Alt, and then you can start typing, and it's going to type at all those places. Or something to change. All right, so
Okay, thank you.
yeah, the other one is you do just Control F, or you can go edit and then find. And for now, we want to find, regardless of case sensitivity or whole world, we can explore this regex. We can add, we can put them here and here as well. But we don't want to change the name to title, for example, so it's fine for now. Right, so we have this, right? We have this array of objects. Now, suppose we, here's what I want to do, right? I want to log it. I want to log array of objects, and then I want to filter, but I want to filter by gender. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can do it here. Let's say each person. You do it like this. Say person dot gender. Let's say I want to filter only the female, right? So you do like this, and then you say, what is it? Oh, sorry, my bad. Should have used semicolon. Now, there are two ways you can do this. You can either do the same thing like I did here, and then backspace and then do the colon, sorry, or you can do the same thing, Control F, and then look for the equal sign, and then replace it with, of course, we want to skip the first one. So we go just go here, replace, 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 replace. I think you should put it in. Right, so we are filtering this array of objects. The return array only returns elements which are objects with gender female. Is that clear? But I don't have to do it like this here. I don't have to declare it anonymously. I can remove this for now, and then I can have its own function. So function called filter by gender, and then I can say for each person return. Again, this is using the explicit return. You can do it implicitly as well, but I think that only works with array functions. But anyways, so person dot gender equal, I think in our example it was right. So then what I can do is say I can copy this, or I can get the function declaration, name function, the function, put it here, and then it's going to do the same thing. Now you may ask, why do we want to do this? It was so easy to do it on the spot anonymously. Well, there are several reasons why you may want to do this. First, this filter function may be used multiple times using the same filter criteria condition. So in that case, it would be much more efficient and economical to declare it somewhere and then just refer to it whenever you're filtering, right? So let's say you have other instances where you need to filter by the same condition. I think it's something to do with NodeMon. I think it runs twice for some reason. It's got nothing to do with the code itself. But good question. Right. And the other reason why you may want to do it like this. Now, this is a fairly simple function for the method filter, but in other cases, it could be very convoluted and long. And if you have it here, anonymous, then it's going to make your code, as they say, spaghetti. So this could be like several lines of code, by the way, whatever this function is. So in that case, it's also a good idea. Could be like, for example, for sort. I think you'll learn about sort, and you'll see that when you're comparing, you need several lines at least. Well, you don't have to, but the usual the syntax that is easy to read is using the if else. You can always use ternary expression and this and that. But in that case, it would be prudent to put this method function outside. Now, is that clear? Or is there anything that's a bit confusing, or you wonder why? Or okay, I guess not. Very good. We can. Okay, great. We can move on. So the next thing that I want to cover is actually chaining methods. Now I understand that probably some of you are already aware of this, and I've seen some of you even do it in your IP, but I'm just going to say it anyways, because I've seen the contrary as well. So suppose we have now an array that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? what do we want to do with this? Suppose we want to map it and then filter it. Although the combination of map and filter sometimes can be solved by reduce, but let's not go there for now. So what I want to do is that I want, for example, to have a function called map and filter, and it's going to take an array, whatever it is. Sorry, and then what it's going to do with it is it's going to return, again this is explicit, whatever is given, array dot map, and then we say, I don't know, just some random stuff, e plus 1, and then I want to also filter e only something greater than 2. So what this is going to do is whatever array it takes, it's going to map it as per this function, and then whatever is being returned from the map method is going to be filtered. So this is called like chaining methods. So we call this map and filter, and we give it our array, right? And we also probably want to log this. Yeah, so let's run it. You see, we'll give it this array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the elements, and what it returns is an array that has gone through map. In this case, increase the element by 1, so it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is returned by the map. We're going to filter it. We're saying we only want to return a new array which fulfills this condition. Each element is greater than 2. That's going to return 3, 4, 5, 6, and we see this is the one that is being returned here. And you can chain as many methods as you want, by the way, so long as these methods return something. So I thought I'd probably just cover that to be safe. This is called chaining. We can have them as talking about chaining, by the way. I think you will learn about promises and promises.then. Then you can chain the then. But I think I don't want to steal Eduardo's thunder. So let's keep it for the week's lectures, the actual lectures. All right, so far so good. Anybody has got any question? All right, I think your silence means that you are good, which is great.
Abdul, can we use
Right.
other methods like reduce, every, sum with this map filter? Can we use all the methods together in a single line, like this, like returning?
What do you mean?
We have now we are returning like array.map.
Yeah.
We are using the map and filter, right? We are returning. Similarly, can we use other methods with this, like map, filter, reduce together?
Of course, you can do reduce. So we have the accumulator. Wait, I think this should work, right? So this is the sum
Of the array elements.
3. It's 18, I think. Right?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I did. Now you've seen that we have added another method. The formatter kicks in and makes it very nice for us. Before, I think without it, it's enough that we put it. But when we do it like this, well, the formatter onsave files, it takes it and makes it nice and very, very readable. So you have to have the formatter, otherwise you're, like I said, it saves you a lot of pain and time and trouble. All right, that was a good question. Anything else that you want to ask? Anything that probably is doubting, that besets a doubt in your mind? All right, I'm gonna assume so far so good. And if you have any questions about anything, anytime, just stop me. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to cover is import, export, and destructuring, because they are connected. Let's cover destructuring first, and then we're going to talk about the different files, because I think we have time. All right, so what do I mean by destructuring? Later, especially when you're dealing with components, I think you'll learn about React. You'll pass down props, and then these props that you receive, like a component receive, you can choose to destructure them, or you can choose to not destructure them, basically. But what do I mean by that? Let's say we have const from 1, and this this function, right, it for some reason expects to receive 2 arguments, like arg1 and arg2, right? And then you can log this argument, arg1 and then arg2. So when you're calling that function, right, you give it I don't know, just suppose we have const string 1 is low, and then the second one is string 2, it's called gold, right? And then we give it. So what is expected is that we're going to print out the first and the second. So as you can see, it prints out hello world. But later, when you're passing down props to components, it's going to be a bit like this. Well, not, but I'll simulate the behavior. So if you do this, and then you say props. So the props that a component receives is going to be like this, pretty much. It's basically going to be, you can access it as if you would access object properties. So in order to print that, you need to do, again, I'm going to do something like that, props, argument 1, argument 2. Oops, sorry about that. I think you need to string 1 and string 2. Right, so you need to access it with the name that, or the name that it was, the namespace that it was given to. So string 1 and string 2. But in this case, the props is not destructured, right? So you need to access still props.string. You can destructure the props you want here, And the way you do it is, one of the ways to do it is to say string 1 and string 2. So you destructure these props, and therefore inside that component or function, then you can access them straight forward, right? There's another way of doing it, which is say props, right? It doesn't know what it is. Okay, this knows what it is now because of closure, and this is outside, so it's going to print it out. But anyways, you can do it like this. String 1 and then string 2 is equal to this one, props. Well, I don't think you can do it in functional components here. But anyways, one of the ways of destructuring props is like this. Well, these are not props anyways, these are functions, but this is the idea of destructuring. Any question, or destructuring any JavaScript object? Any question? Is that clear? Okay, very good, because I need this idea as well when we have different files. I'll just give a very simple example. Let's say we have a helpers, a helpers file, or whatever it is. Basically, we have function definitions or whatever it is in another file, but we want to use it in another file. There are different ways of doing it, but I think in Node it uses common JS syntax. So we'll see how that works. So we have a function, I call it logger1, which is just going to log. So what it's going to do is it's going to say this is logger1. Of course, this is a very simple function. There are, I mean, usually when you do something like this, it's much more complicated with higher order functions, but we'll cover that, don't worry. And then we have another one called logger2. So how can we use these two functions inside the index? For example, for whatever reason, I don't want the definition of these functions here. What can I do? So I think that some of you have shown that, and I think some of you have done it. I think a lot of you, most of you have done it. We are going to export these two functions, and from here, and then we're going to import it from here. So there are many ways to export, like different syntax in CommonJS. Like let's go with module exports, and then we go logger1. So now we're just exporting the first one, right? If you want to export the second one, then we go logger2. All right, so far so good. Now what I want to do, for example, in the index.js is to import those functions from another file. So what can I do? This has something to do with destructuring as well. Since from helpers we are exporting these two functions, first of all, we can say, for example, I think this works, logger1, and then if you click tab, it will automatically import that function, logger1, and then, for example, if I want to also execute or call logger2, I say logger2, and then I press tab on the keyboard, it's going to import that as well. So let's call that, and then if we save, it's going to tell you this is logger1, this is logger2, meaning we're calling them from here. But that's not the only way. It depends. This is already destructured, which is very nice. you can save it, not destructive. For example, I can save it in the const called helpers. If I do this, this will not run because logger1 is not defined. What you can do is the same thing with the props earlier. You go helpers. Actually, let's do it like this. Helpers dot logger1, because helpers will take in whatever this module exports, which is logger1 and logger2. And by the way, you don't have to use and then helpers.logger1, for example, is going to call the first one, and helpers.logger2 is going to call the second. You don't have to run both of them, by the way. You can do this as well. So that's to do with import and export in CommonJS. There's another way of exporting, and this is quite interesting as well. This is a very nice syntax if you want to export these functions as they are, but that's not the only way. Another useful way is, suppose you want to, by the way, so far so good? All right, what is it?
Can we import these functions which are exported in more than one file, like index.js?
Yes, you can. Suppose you have another file which is called index2.js. Well, you can, if you do logger and then helper, it will automatically import it for you. And if this thing runs, then this will call again as well. Okay. So yeah, that's the cool thing about CommonJS and this modules.
So if we have the file in some other folders.
Yes, you can do that as well.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, why don't I demonstrate that to you? For example, this is called, it's not a component, but component, and then we have indexed here. Yes, it's moved. And then I go logger2. But now my node1 is watching index.js. So let's cancel that. Yes, terminate. What we are going to do is we are going to cd to component. Or we don't have to do that actually. Let's do it with this node. Component, and then so this is running index2, which is in component. But since you are actually importing it correctly with the correct path, dot dot, going up once, and then helpers, which is this. By the way, see this, it's the same thing that I said. If it's a JavaScript file, you don't have to do JavaScript. You can do it if you want, but you don't have to. The extension. So if we do it again, this is logger, which is running this one. So as long as this is the correct path, then yeah, it doesn't matter where it is. It has to have a correct path. So let's run npm start again, because we are here in index. Right, so where was I? Oh yeah. So there's another way. By the way, everyone else good? That was a good question. Yes, going once, going twice. Okay, everybody's good then. Excellent. All right, so the next thing that I want to cover here, may be useful, maybe not, is there's another way you can export. Let's say you can export logger1, and then you export it as a logger1, right? And then exports logger2 as logger2. So this seems to be the same thing. In fact, if you run, we face the same thing, but just longer. But that's not the case, because this allows you to customize the name of the function. Suppose you want to export logger1 as alternate 1, and this one is alternate 2. Now, if you run, it's going to complain because it's saying here we're trying to call logger1 and logger2, but it's unknown because from this module, logger1 and logger2 are exported as alternate 1 and alternate 2. Therefore, we do something like this. It has to match them. And then if we save, and it's going to run correctly. Does that make sense? This could come in useful, but I guess if you use the old module exports, you just export it like this, it's fine as long as you want to export these two with the same name. And this is not only true with functions, this is only if you want to export variables, whatever it is, you can pretty much do the same thing like this, or if you don't want to change the name. This is because sometimes in this module, you have it as, you have a function, whatever it is, with a certain namespace, but in another module, you want it as something else. Or in every other module, you want it as something else. All right, I think it's good so far.
Abdul, I have a
Right.
question.
Sure.
How is it making use of this function with the name alternate 1 and alternate 2, since we have module.exports here?
Yeah, but with this case, you cannot rename the thing. I think
Okay,
you can. I'm not sure. Can you do?
we change the function name as alternate 1 and alternate 2.
Wait, I think you can do it. Let me just check. Actually. Oh yeah, you can do it as well like that. Alternate 1 and then equal logger, so it's not going to complain. But it's good to know that you can do it differently as well, because I think if you want to, this is very nice, but doing the exports dot the name and then equal the function could also be useful in other cases. Good question. You can do this as well. Alternate 2, but this isn't going to complain now, so we have to change it here. Right, but that's not the only way you can do it. You can export these, whoops, as they are, and then just change the name when you're importing. That's also possible. So you can also change it here, the name, but I don't know, usually it's enough that you can change it from the module that you're exporting in as well.
Thank you.
So how's everybody doing? Asleep yet, or boring stuff? Huh? Or I think everybody's good now.
Yeah.
Great, great. So, right. So the other thing that I would probably the penultimate thing that I want to cover is something called higher order functions, and you'll do a lot of callbacks like this the same. So, you guys familiar with higher order functions?
A little.
Okay. So yeah. Yeah, higher order function is basic. Sorry, go ahead.
We just said I just said we're a little familiar with it.
Right. So in a nutshell, higher order function is a function that you pass as a parameter into another function, and then which you can then execute. I think when you're dealing with listeners and callbacks, especially with later when you run React, you'll have to deal with a lot of higher order function. And what do I mean by that? Okay, suppose that I want to, with higher order function, I can pass the function as an argument to another function. As if I would pass any other argument, whether it's a const or whatever, right? So suppose I have a main function, let's call it function main, and then what I'm going to do is oh right, this has got something to do with the structuring. Should I cover this before we go to a higher order function? I think that there's something interesting which you did with your one of your functional when you're concatenating ABC. Do you guys remember that?
Abdul, I have a doubt here.
Sure.
Yeah, so the function which are callback, so they are higher order functions? Like
Yes.
Okay. All of them of it?
I mean, we'll go to the higher order functions now, but I think I forgot to. I want to include something else also, which is kind of probably nifty. So, do you guys remember when you had to concatenate the ABC in your last week exercise?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have used concat method.
And how many arguments were you expecting?
2 arguments?
3 actually, right?
Can it be more than that?
Yeah, the current attribute and the next and the initial value.
So how did you deal with the multiple arguments? Let's say you have a function, you have a task to have a function to write a function that takes an arbitrary number of arguments. All right, suppose it's like this, right? We have a function, let's call it logger. But when we call, and logger is basically just console logging whatever it receives. This is just a simplified argument example. We can do whatever you want it to do. But suppose we call a logger, and then, but the caveat is that logger may take 1, may take 2, may take 3, may take 4. Wait, argument 1, argument 2, argument 3, or even a million arguments. How would you deal with this? Any ideas? I think if you've done that function, you've probably come across this, well, one of the solutions to solve this. I'm still hoping that one of you at least.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
dot args higher order function with the array, sorry, arrow functions with the arrow functions. If we don't know how many arguments we are going to pass it, we can make use of the arrow functions.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's correct, but it's not a feature of an arrow function. We're going to use the spread operator, the spread syntax. So basically, what we are going to say is that we are going to take an argument, which the spread syntax is very versatile, but in this case, the arguments will be treated as an array. So we can give it any arbitrary number of arguments. Suppose we have, I don't know, the first argument is hello. And then we have another some string. So in this way, with the spread syntax, what you can do is you can say args, and then you can apply any array method that you have applied so far. For example, you can apply for each, and then we want to log each element, right? So if we run this, wait a minute. Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, it is going to do whatever you tell it to do with each argument. And in this case, we can add as many arguments as you want. It's going to do it. So I thought I'd cover that because you took that last week, right? So now we go to higher order functions. Right, so say you have a function, a main function, right? And then what the main function does is it basically takes in an argument, call it a number, and then a callback function number 1, and then a callback function number 2. So what I want to do with it is I want to log whatever callback function number 1 when I call it back with the number, which is another argument, as the argument for that callback function. And I want to do the same thing with the second function. Or let's just go with one function first. So what does this mean? When I run main, basically I want so whatever run actually logs the result of callback function, callback 1. But what is callback 1? We can define it also. Let's say we want a function that doubles whatever number is given to it. So it goes something like this, right? So this doubles it. So later, so when we call main, let's say we call main and then we give it the first argument, let's say 5, and then the second callback function, which is this function, and then we run it. So what's going to be printed is 10. This is because the main function actually logs whatever callback 1 return. But callback 1 is what? Callback 1 in this case is another function which returns whatever argument is given to it and multiplies it by 2. I think this is a very straightforward one, but can you wrap your head around this concept? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Great. Now, why do you say? Why do we want to pass a function? It's an argument to another function. Well, it depends on the scenario, and then a lot of scenarios where you actually do this. One of which is probably when you're passing down props to a component and you want to have a listener which actually executes that pass down prop, which is a callback to another component. But for example, if I have another function, which is a helper, basically does the same thing, but it has the thing. Right, we can have it like so. We can call main, which does the same thing again, but we just give it another callback function. For example, I don't want to double the whatever I give as my first parameter. I want to halve it. So in this way, you just pass it the function that returns half the number. So you say if it's going to return this. And like I said, you can do it with another callback. For example, if you do the same thing, you come to callback number 2. Of course, you're going to have to give it 2 arguments. If you save, then it's going to call these 2 callback functions. Callback number 1. By the way, the console log is just here. It could have easily been inside, I mean, as part of this callback function. And that's really nice. For example, if you have another squarer, which is basically there's a math module here, but I'm not going to use it. But if you discover it or study it as part of the lectures, so suppose now it's very easy and interchangeable. I don't want the halter. I want the square and the doubler. So I do this, and these are the results. So the double of 5 and the square of 5. Well, that's a very made up example for callback functions, but I hope at least with this rudimentary introduction to callback functions, you're not confused of how you can pass functions as arguments to other functions. So far, so good.
Abdul, I
Right.
have a question, Abdul.
Sure.
Is there any limitations like only these many callback functions need to be passed as a parameter into the function? Like number, callback 1 and callback 2. And can I add 5 more callback functions as a parameter?
Of course, and obviously, the same thing with the spread operator before. If you're expecting 3 callbacks, then you probably do callback 3 here. So it's unlimited, I mean virtually unlimited. But you can also do something like right arguments before, but the caveat is that we have to have let's say args, and then we have to use the name args square, and then we have to say args dot number. I think wait, something is wrong. Args dot doubler. Wait, not
Do we
apparently
use
you're gonna do it with spread syntax. I have to look this up. Yeah.
Yeah, do we need to use this args dot in main calling function, like main 5 args dot doubler, args dot squarer, like that?
Yes, but I think that's if you don't know how many
Callback.
arguments you get. But usually the usual case is that you will know how many arguments your function will take. Therefore, this spread operator using args is not very common, I think.
Thank you.
Right. I hear like somebody else had another question, or no? All right. Well, we have only 4 minutes. I had wished that I would cover Clojure, but if you guys have any questions, we can just leave the last 4 minutes for questions. Otherwise, I could probably cover a little bit of Clojure, but it's not going to be enough, I think. Enough concept. All right, so if nobody has any question, I'll probably try to cover it.
Abdul, we
Yeah.
have other array iteration methods like sum, every, find index. Are those higher order functions?
No, I think these will be called array prototype methods. These are basically methods that you can apply to arrays.
Okay.
So yeah, let's go. Let's say we have an array, right? And then we want to log it. What was the method that you said? Find index.
Find index.
I think this goes like this. Maybe it's not a function. What is the method actually? Now here's a good developer practice, always go through the documentation. I usually never know the syntax right off the top of my head. I think the syntax goes like this. Mistaken. Yeah, so it goes like that. So always consult the documentation. It's a very good practice, because a good developer is not someone who memorizes all the syntax, but someone who knows that they can do these things and they know where to look for these things. So yeah, so this is the same thing as map or for each or reduce, basically methods that you can apply to arrays.
Thank you, Abdul.
I'm not sure if they're higher order functions. I don't think they're higher order functions. No, they're not. All right, looks like I'm not going to cover closure, but it's fine.
How long can it take for closure?
Okay, I can give you the 2-minute version.
Well,
Alright.
if it's up 3
So,
minutes more.
like in a nutshell, let's say we have a name here, and then I have a function that logs basically name. But this function, for example, it doesn't take an argument. I can do this, by the way, which is log name. I can call it, and then if I run it, it's still going to log this small components, although I did not pass it as an argument to the function, or it's not even there in the function definition to take it. And why does this work? Is because of closure. Basically, functions can access variables that is within the scopes of functions or whatever is outside of them. Because in this case, this is the whole thing. So what's outside of log name is this whole thing. So it has access to these constant variables.
Okay.
So don't be surprised. But like it has its uses, but I don't think we can cover it today. If I don't know if you guys want, I don't know. Just I hope this has been useful, but I can make part 3 with just maybe closure. Let's see. I have other topics that I wanted to cover. Scopes, closures, variable hoisting, bind, and that's generally just useful function and variable names organization. And somebody mentioned how to push and how to interact with your Git repository from VS Code. But I think those are like more advanced. So the way I ordered it so far is that I've tried to cover the most essentials first. And I think even without closure, I think I have given you the important stuff. Not that the others are not important, but these are quite useful basics, I think. All right. Anybody has any questions? And if not, I will stop the recording. And I hope I can